Hello friends, and welcome back to Dom's Roundtable. I've spent the last few days testing out all of the new Spirit Ashes in the Shadow of the Erdtree in various different scenarios, and I've come up with the definitive list of the absolute best and worst summons in the Elden Ring DLC. Some of these results are really going to surprise you, and I'm not just saying that to be some cringy, stereotypical YouTuber like, oh my god, you won't believe who's at number 1, and wow, number 5 blew my mind. No, I did not see this list going like this. There were some truly bad Spirit Ashes that I really thought would be incredible, and some really good ones that I was not expecting. So without further ado, let's get into the tier list, and we are going to start in the middle of the list, reviewing the 5th worst and the 5th best Spirit Ash summons in the DLC, so not great but not terrible. And then we'll progress to the extremes, where we will show off the absolute worst and the literal best Spirit Ash summon in the game towards the end of the video. And as we jump into the 5th worst Spirit Ash summon in the game, Black Knight Commander Andreas, please note most of the footage you'll be seeing is quite similar because I wanted to make sure that they all had a level playing field, so I chose this Messmer army camp for my test, and I wanted to see how best they could all clear this camp in the best of 3 attempts. And straight away, I told you this list would be surprising. Black Knight Commander Andreas, I thought was one of the best summons from the preview event I did back in Paris. And I was so surprised to find that when left to his own devices, Andreas could not hold his own. His poise is absolutely abysmal, and he can easily get stun locked to death by every single enemy. If he gets lucky with his attacks, he is sometimes okay, which is why he's right at the bottom of the worst list. He's not terrible, but there are far better options. And please note, I have taken into consideration summons' utility in this list. For instance, if they are particularly good at support or tanking, and summons with red eyes versus summons without red eyes, that's something we'll talk about later. So yes, he is pretty tanky, but honestly, he's not particularly good at holding aggro, and even though his damage is okay, he just gets stun locked so frequently that he ends up becoming useless in almost every situation. Now for the 5th best summon in the game, we have got Demi-Human Swordsman Yosh. Though he is just labelled as a swordsman, Yosh is just as powerful, if not even more so, than his master, Onza. You acquire this summon once you defeat Demi-Human Swordmaster Onza at the bottom of Belurat Jail, and even though Yosh is one of the more squishy summons on this list, due to the fact that he spends half the fight invisible, he doesn't take much damage. And when he deals damage, especially if his AI is nice and he uses his more powerful movesets, he can deal thousands upon thousands of damage without taking a hit. The reason this guy is only 5th is because you have to get quite lucky with his AI. Sometimes he can be easily stun locked if he's not teleporting around, but if you get lucky with him, he can easily be probably the highest DPS summon on this list. Also, the fact that we get such a cute little Yoda looking Demi-Human as one of our allies is so cool to me. Well worthy of the 5th spot, and definitely one to add to your list if you are someone who likes to use Spirit Ashes. Next up, for the 4th worst summon in the game, we've got Black Knight Captain Hugh. All we really need to say for this guy is take Andreas, strip away all his survivability, don't even increase his damage, and you have Black Knight Captain Hugh. This guy goes all guns blazing, ball to the wall, does not care about his own defense or survivability, and considering how surprisingly squishy and poise breaky the Black Knight captains are, this makes Hugh the worst of both worlds. He doesn't really do any more damage than Andreas, and because he doesn't have a massive shield, he doesn't ever bother defending himself. He can easily be stun locked to death by even a single Messmer soldier or Bloodfiend. He is truly absolutely trash. I was so surprised how bad the Black Knights performed in combat when they weren't heavily supported by the player. Now obviously I'm fully aware that Spirit Ashes shouldn't be able to solo the whole game for you. That's not the point of them. They're not supposed to be an automatic win button. But especially if you're summoning a Black Knight Captain, some of the highest ranking soldiers in Messmer's army, they should at least be able to hold their own against a soldier. Especially, I should mention, I haven't even said up to this point, when all of these ashes are maxed out at +10 with 10 Revered Spirit Ash Blessing as well. So they all deal double damage, they take half damage, they are as powerful as they can possibly be, and he can barely even take out a single one of the starting enemies. So keep that information in mind as we move further and further up this list. Now we move into the fourth best Spirit Ash in the game. That is Divine Bird Warrior Ornis. I've covered his location in multiple videos by this point, so I won't dwell too much on exactly where you have to go to find him, but basically in Lower Ra over to the west, jump up a Spirit Spring, and you'll find him in a chest in a hidden room. Also, fun fact before we talk about why he is so insanely powerful, if you didn't know, in the pre-release version of the game, he actually shared his artwork with the Finger Maiden Theralina puppet. And I assumed this was a placeholder and there was some kind of bug there, so as the developers had very kindly given me early access, I reached out to them and I said to them, "Oh, is this right? It looks like he shares the identical artwork with Finger Maiden Theralina puppet." And they came back and confirmed, "Yep, it is absolutely correct. There are no placeholder assets in the game. Everything that you're seeing is exactly as it will be on launch." And I thought, that's really weird. Sure enough, on launch day, there was a patch almost immediately after the game released which changed a few things, including the artwork for Divine Bird Warrior Ornis. Anyway, the main two reasons Divine Bird Warrior is one of the top Spirit Ash summons in the game are firstly, his incredibly big, flowy moveset, and secondly, the amount of poise this guy has. Especially when Ornis decides to fly up into the air and shoot down his Divine Bird feathers, they can deal thousands of damage. It is genuinely ridiculous how much damage this guy can do. And he just never seems to get knocked over. His poise is amazing, which makes him really effective against both groups of enemies and big, heavy-hitting bosses. Also, his flavor text is so damn cool. Just listen to this. Ornis succeeded in taming the Divine Bird and made its wings his own as he soared through the sky. When he finally fell to Earth, he lived on as the guardian deity of the Temple Quarter. And he really lives up to that title when he is out on the field of battle. One of the best Spirit Ash summons in the game and well worthy of your time and attention. Now for the third worst Spirit Ash summon in the DLC. We are truly getting into the dregs now. This will be another really surprising one. We are looking at Fire Knight Queelign. And this will be really great news for people who aren't sure whether to use the Iris of Grace or the Iris of Occultation at the end of Fire Knight Queelign's questline. Always use the Iris of Occultation, always get his weapon. His weapon is actually really good, and his Spirit Ash summon is genuinely terrible. The first reason it's not very good is, as you can see, he is one of these Spirit Ashes with red eyes, and if you didn't know what that means that these Spirit Ashes will firstly automatically attack any enemy on sight, which could drag you into fights that you don't want, and also it means if you want to move on to a new area, they won't follow you. They will just stay there and patrol the area where they're spawned, meaning if you want help from your Spirit Ash throughout an entire area, you won't get that from a red-eyed summon. But even without that negative, there are other reasons why this guy is so bad. Firstly, he's got an exceptionally high FP cost. And like Black Knight Commander Hugh, he has the worst combination of absolutely no regard for his own well-being, along with no poise, meaning he will just keep swinging through enemies' attacks and getting knocked over and stunned and staggered to death before he can do anything. Truly, the only way this guy is effective is if you are giving him insane amounts of support and keeping aggro 100% of the time. Trash summon, and that will be great news for so many people because you now know the best reward to choose at the end of his questline. Now for the third best Spirit Ash in Shadow of the Erdtree, we have got Taylew the Golem Smith. Very expensive Spirit Ash, one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive from memory, costing 138 FP to summon. However, Taylew is an absolute god in combat, really good at holding aggro, insane amounts of poise, maybe even infinite poise honestly, as you well know from fighting the Golem Smiths yourself. Along with that, he has many different ground slam attacks that will knock enemies off balance. He will shoot his fists out at enemies. He even has a really quick 180 attack if he is being attacked from the rear. Taylew's moveset covers all bases, and he is surprisingly fast for how big and clunky he looks. At the end of the day, he's just a giant living rock. Genuinely, if you are looking for a tanky, beefy, meaty, taunty Spirit Ash, this is the one for you. He will not die. He has tens of thousands of health. He's definitely not got the most DPS of all of the Spirit Ashes on this list, but he more than makes up for it by being the immovable wall that he is. And just before we move on to the second worst Spirit Ash in the game, I just wanted to read out this line from Taylew's flavor text because it is so sweet. Taylew was said to be the runt of the litter and the first to stop moving, but it was he who would become the guardian deity of smithery. That line just fills my heart with such warmth. He's such an awesome, awesome character. And it should be pretty self-explanatory, but where you get Taylew the Golem Smith is right at the end of Taylew's Ruined Forge when you interact with the forge at the end of the dungeon. Now, as we move into the second worst Spirit Ash in the whole of the DLC, we are looking at the Bloodfiend Hexer. Genuinely, I only really have bad things to say about this summon. Firstly, I thought it was really cool and unique that you use HP to summon it instead of FP. I think there's only one other summon in the game that uses that, and that's the Mimic Tier. And as this is the Hexer, the one that casts clouds of blood, I thought this could be really powerful because the weapon that you get, I believe it's the Bloodfiend Sacred Spear, that's pretty damn powerful actually. It's kind of like a lesser version of Mogwin's Spear. So I thought this guy could be interesting. If allowed to cast his spell and bleed all the enemies around you, this could be really, really big. Unfortunately, that bleed proc is the only thing he has going for him, and even then it doesn't build up very quickly and it doesn't bleed enemies all that often. He is the squishiest motherfucker I have ever seen. He dies so quickly if you allow enemies to get to him, and he makes no attempt to defend himself. He just keeps trying to spam that move, which he can only really do to enemies at range because it's so easy for him to be staggered out of it. He has no health, he deals no damage. He is genuinely just a giant waste of space, and he wastes your own health just for summoning him. The only decent thing is the fact that he can cast his Cloud of Blood quite far away, so if left completely unchecked, he can do a little bit of damage, but I really mean a little tiny bit of damage. Don't forget, I've got 10 out of 10 for my Revered Spirit Ash buff, and all of these Spirit Ashes are at plus 10, and he is doing pitiful amounts of damage, considering how long it takes him to charge this attack, and how quickly he dies if enemies get anywhere near him. Well deserving of the second worst Spirit Ash in the entire game. Now let's take a look at the second best Spirit Ash in the game. Before making this list, I really thought I would put this Spirit Ash summon at number 1. I am talking about Jolán and Anna. There is an argument to put this joint first, maybe, but I will come back to why I haven't when I cover who is in the top spot. Firstly, it is a bit of a ball ache to get this summon. You do have to completely finish Count Ymir's questline and then give Jolán the Iris of Grace at the end, meaning you lose out on her weapon. So that's one reason that I've put a different Spirit Ash first, because this way you can still use the best Spirit Ash in the game and you also don't miss out on a weapon. Then once you've done this, you need to get to Anna's puppet body. From that, you have to get to the hinterlands, go through the Shaman village, and drop down onto Rabath's Rise, and from there you can interact with the puppet, and you can fuse together Jolán and Anna. And in certain situations, they are the best Spirit Ash in the game. It's absolutely fantastic that there's 2 of them. In fact, this is the only Spirit Ash with multiple entities that have made it into my top 5. And in certain situations, that can be really beneficial because it's very easy for them to gank enemies and help protect each other. And also, both of these sword hands have insanely good bleed build-up, so they're really good for late game bosses who are very susceptible to bleed. So potentially, if you want to use a spirit summon in the final boss, this is the best summon for you. This is the only summon that would trump the number 1 summon on my list, but purely in situations where you have enemies with insane amounts of health that are very susceptible to bleed. absolutely well deserving of the second best spot in the game. As I say, in some situations, perhaps even the best. Now, before we move into the absolute worst and the absolute best, I wanted to give you two honourable mentions that I really wanted to include in this list, but they just weren't quite good enough. So I'd probably put these two 6th and 7th, and that is Curseblade Mira and the Finger Creeper. Curseblade Mira, don't get me wrong, insane damage output, really good at dodging attacks, which makes her nearly on par with Yosh. But the one thing that puts him slightly above her, even though he is slightly squishier, he will dodge more attacks because he quite often likes to go invisible. And also Mira, just like Fire Knight Queelign and Fire Knight Hilda, is another red-eyed summon, so she's not going to follow you around, and she's also potentially going to drag you into fights you didn't want to be a part of. So that's the only letdown, and unfortunately it is a big one. But also we have the Finger Creeper, genuinely the best support summon in the game. Insane health pool. This thing never dies. And if you or the Finger Creeper start to take damage, it literally sticks its middle finger up at your enemies and heals you both for a crazy amount of health. This thing is so tanky, and it would have made it into the top 5 if it was better at holding aggro. Unfortunately, it seems to get stuck in this cycle animation of just spamming its heal again and again and never really doing anything else. So it's really good at surviving, and it's hilariously cool to use, but unfortunately it doesn't do much else apart from that, which is why it just barely missed out on the top 5. And as we move into the absolute worst summon in the whole of the Elden Ring DLC, if you've been enjoying my Elden Ring content up to this point and you want more guides, more tier lists, and more Souls-like content in the near future, including Black Myth Wukong and Phantom Blade Zero, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel. And also leave a like and a comment letting me know what you want in the future so I can continue creating the perfect content for you. And as for the absolute worst Spirit Ash in the game, we have got the Inquisitors. Ironically, these are probably the last Spirit Ash that you will find, as they are in the very final area in Anir Ilim. And it does state that one of them casts a tower hex to heal HP, whilst the hex of the other boosts her own attack power. However, aside from spamming these hexes, they don't really do anything. They both die in about 4 hits. They move incredibly slowly. They occasionally bonk enemies with their candlesticks for about 1 damage, and every so often they will try and do their flame spew attack. However, even if they are left unchecked to do this attack, it will deal about 4 damage. It has absolutely no stagger, it will not interrupt any enemy's attacks, and they will just run up and kill your Inquisitors almost instantly. I truly have never seen a more trash duo in the game. If you would like a duo of enemies, you are better off just using like Mesmer soldiers or something really bog standard. At least they can actually do some decent damage. The Inquisitors truly have no redeeming qualities for me. They are slow, they are weak, they do no damage. I cannot fathom why they have decided to put this Spirit Ash right at the end of the game, as if it's going to be something really cool and really powerful. They are just terrible. Please never ever waste your glove wart to upgrade these guys. And now, as we finally move into number 1, the absolute best Spirit Ash summon in the entire game, ironically also found in Anir Ilim. So both the best and the worst Spirit Ashes are found within a stone's throw of each other. I am of course talking about the Horned Warrior. To understand the power of the Horned Warrior, all you really need to do is take Divine Bird Ornis, remove his flight attack, unfortunately, because yes, that is really cool, but then give him more attack, more health, more poise, and multiple ways that he can completely stun lock and knock down enemies so they can never ever attack him. His moveset is absolutely insane. He will quite often do 4 to 6 attacks back to back without any indication of stopping. In the DLC, with Revered Spirit Ashes, 2,000 to 3,000 damage in just 1 combo, which will easily take out most minor enemies before they have a chance to even fight back. Then he's got this really powerful attack where he covers his weapon in the Divine Thorns and makes it about 4 times bigger than usual, just absolutely annihilating anything that gets anywhere near it. Then he slams it down for this huge AoE attack that's going to stagger and knock over almost every enemy in the game. He's also got a shoulder barge that again will knock almost every enemy off balance, if not just outright knock them over. He will do the same thing with a kick attack as well. He genuinely is the best of every Spirit Ash. Loads of health, loads of attack, a crazy good moveset, and I don't think I have ever seen this guy stagger. He has infinite amounts of poise. Oh, and before we move on, another thing I should mention is that he's actually the cheapest Spirit Ash in my whole list at just over 100. In fact, he has specifically 101 FP. And I like to think that's because the devs know how OP he is and that he's just going to loll in the face of all of your enemies. So it is unfortunate that you can't get him until right at the end of your playthrough, but he's well worth the wait and he will serve you very, very well as you go into New Game Plus. And that is it, my friends, for the 5 best and 5 worst Spirit Ashes in the DLC. Make sure you go and grab all the best ones and make sure you actively avoid the worst ones, obviously. So with that, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.